Welcome! I am Dr. Christopher Mattson of the USC Rossier School of Education. This presentation will cover some do's and don'ts of academic research and writing. Particularly for academic research, I will cover finding sources, reading the literature and taking notes, minimizing bias, as well as real and perceived conflicts of interest. For academic writing, I will cover chunking and outlining, clarity, logic, and flow, pseudonyms, and common writing mistakes. Academic research begins with a search for sources on a topic. Start with searches for peer-reviewed primary sources with minimal bias. Do not assume each source has equal weight or significance. You can search online with your libraries, Google Scholar, and other places like Connected Papers. Use multiple methods, though, for better coverage. Make sure to also manage how you save and store the files. A dissertation will have countless sources. Be purposeful from the beginning with how you organize them. The DOIs, URLs, and dates you download the files are also worth saving. Once you have an initial pool of literature, you'll then want to use the existing sources you have to look both backwards and forwards. Begin by identifying sources from the literature reviews that you already have. This allows you to look backwards. Important though, do not cite from someone else's lit review unless you absolutely have to. Per APA, you should cite secondary sources sparingly when you have no other option or have been instructed to do so by faculty. In all other instances, find and use the primary source. A useful method is to enter a notable source you've already located into Google Scholar. You can then use the Cited By feature and find more recent sources. Note, sort by using a custom range of years to better help you put together a more complete variety of sources over time. It's also important to have a plan for expanding your depth and breadth. Then, once you've exhausted this process of using and finding more sources, return to the initial searches for related topic areas worth additional examination. Finding sources is meaningless unless you have a method for reading and taking notes. Your aim should be to figure out the details and trends. Since reading every word is impossible, I suggest you start with a quick skim for content, structure, and first impressions. This will help you figure out how the source was written and the sections to look more closely at. It should also help you think about your own writing and how to structure it with headings and consistent alignment. Mostly though, I want you to take note of new sources to locate and read. Figure out how the population, methodology, and perspectives work together to shape the study. Understand the context for the findings. Consider the reasoning behind the implications for practice, and think about your possible connection to the recommendations for future research. The better you do this for each source and the literature as a whole for your topic, the better you'll inform your understanding of trends over time for these areas. None of this happens, though, without intention. Strategies and processes are vital. You should develop a plan for organizing your files and notes. I've created a sample note-taking guide to help. The link for this and others mentioned can be found in the YouTube video description section. As you read and take notes, it is also important to ask yourself, could I do something like that? Seeing what other researchers have done should help inspire your own research. When it comes to academic research, the first step to minimizing bias is through your search for the literature. You'll want to find and follow backwards and forwards the literature trail. Search and find what you need for understanding, not for sources to confirm your beliefs. For each subtopic and perspective covered, pay attention to the quantity and quality of sources. Seek out depth and breadth. When it comes to minimizing bias in your writing, think about your topics, goals, and structure. Synthesize the literature before you outline. Become a saturated sponge. Create an outline before you write. Think about the content, structure, and purpose for your writing as you outline, and keep things minimally biased. As you write, show the reader what is important. Instead of telling them, let the reader form their own opinion. Lastly, make sure to read the APA bias-free language section to both improve your awareness and to further minimize bias in your writing. Real and perceived conflicts of interest connect with and shape bias. As humans, we have blind spots and we need to keep them in check. USC has a particular policy regarding research in relation to conflicts of interest. When you consider writing a dissertation as a lot like building a house, imagine the trouble you'd have if you finished a house before looking at the building codes you were supposed to follow. Certainly, your chair supervises and is responsible for your research. However, your chair supervises other students. Do not expect them to read every word you write or know everything you are planning. Considering your dissertation carries the name of your chair, Rossier, and USC, it's best to follow the guidelines as best that you can. I acknowledge the purpose of this slide is to scare you. Be smart though. Set things up with consideration. As you review the literature, examine what other researchers have done and examine their own potential conflicts, limitations, and delimitations. This info should help guide your own research plans. Similarly, when it comes to your own writing, there are additional considerations. You want to show multiple views and perspectives, particularly show competing views and perspectives. Write for both an average educated person and an expert in the field. Consider their expectations. In relation to real and perceived conflicts of interest, readers will expect you to clarify and own up to things immediately in the writing. Otherwise, they'll be wondering, what the heck are you doing? How come you're not telling us more? Lastly, your chair and committee will have their own experiences, biases, and potential conflicts. Be aware of that and do your best to navigate, communicate, and negotiate. Shifting more to academic writing. Unlike a class paper, you don't just sit down and write a dissertation. You have to break things up into chunks. Think SMART goals if you want to make progress. Some of this chunking should come naturally as you review the literature. For instance, your understanding of the literature is the foundation for your dissertation. As you reach a saturation point in your lit review, think about how the lit review you write might be chunked into 3 to 5 sections with minimal overlap. My recommendation is to focus on perspectives near the end of your lit review because that will tie things together nicely and help set up your own perspectives, research questions, hypotheses, and methodology that follows. Furthermore, as you reflect on these distinct subsections of your lit review, examine and label different sources based on the subsections they will be useful for. Perhaps copy-paste them into digital folders by subsection topic, and with the understanding that some sources will be useful for multiple sections. Next comes the process of outlining. Once you've identified a realistic chunk to work on, create an outline for it. Before doing this though, make sure you're familiar with the rules of APA heading, hierarchy, and formatting. For instance, you'll need at least 2 subheadings of the same type or none of that subheading type in a section. Also, as you outline, identify and regularly state the content, purpose, and structure. For example, your introduction for every section should clearly establish the content, purpose, and structure for that section, and the writing that follows should deliver with that same expected structure. Clarity, logic, and flow keeps your reader from abandoning you. If your instructor or chair isn't offering much feedback and seems somewhat aloof and uncertain as to what they should recommend, that's a potential sign they haven't read much of your stuff, and most likely because you are lacking clarity, logic, and flow. Your first step to improving is to read through this link and the information in it. As you can see, each of these topic areas covered are common problems for graduate students to improve upon. If you're not familiar with this information, your writing will have issues and people will not want to read it. To help, I've placed this link in the YouTube video description. Make sure to check it out. Pseudonym usage seems like it should be easy and with a clear purpose. The main reason is to provide anonymity and to protect the confidentiality of the person, group, and/or place you are researching. Use of pseudonyms can also provide distance and separation that allows for easier generalizability because the reader is not biased by any connections or beliefs about the real person, place, and/or organization. Still though, pseudonyms can be tricky. The establishment of a pseudonym, much like an abbreviation, should ideally come early. As you can see from this example, you'll want something that is easy for both an average educated person and an expert in the field to accept and follow. You do not want anything like this bad example that distracts the reader, and especially not something with a name or abbreviation that repeatedly distracts the readers throughout the writing. There is no need to be cute. It does not help you. Just create something simple and easy to follow. Most importantly, though, once you establish a pseudonym, the organization and people become fictional. From there, you'll need to continue the fiction with reason and with the expectation that you're representing the necessary and often generalized characteristics of the true organization. For instance, you should provide approximations and paraphrasing instead of precise numbers in directly quoted text, because the latter is identifiable. Additionally, you should not cite real sources that directly or indirectly identify your organization or people, and you should definitely not create and cite fictitious sources. For example, if you wish to establish the mission of your organization, do not directly quote it or provide a link to a real or altered URL. Instead, you can simply state that the organization website provides information on the mission, and you can paraphrase it generally, taking care to provide necessary information, but without making the organization identifiable. Here are some common writing mistakes. These are ordered based on how easy they are to spot. Once again, relevant links are in the YouTube video description. Please make sure your title page is formatted properly. It's the first thing people see. APA 7 has guidance for papers. For your dissertation, you'll need to find your academic program guidelines and requirements for title page and front matter formatting. When it comes to font type and size, I will sometimes hear from people thinking APA 7 allows for a variety of font types and sizes, which is somewhat correct. But then I'll see a paper and it literally and improperly contains a variety of different fonts and sizes throughout it. APA 7 makes very clear that you need to use the same font and size throughout your paper, with the exception only for figures, computer code, and footnotes. Furthermore, Rossier faculty governance, for the sake of consistency, decided that Times New Roman size 12 should be the font for students to use in their dissertation. Line spacing should be double and with before and after spacing set to 0, with the exception of tables, figure images, computer code, and footnotes. And there should only be a single space between sentences. Proper formatting and hierarchy for section labels and headings also cause problems. Worth noting, each should be in title case. The YouTube description will have links for that. Tables and figures can be very tricky, which is why I've created a file to make things easier and with many examples. For margins, make sure they are set up and simply do not violate the 1-inch margins. If you need a landscape page, then set one up or more properly. There are also clear guidelines for lists. Follow them and understand there should not be a list or sublist for a single item, much like headings. Hyphens, N dashes, and M dashes each have their own purpose. Unfortunately, many students use hyphens for everything. It doesn't work, and I understand some of that is the result of online writing or online information that replaces dashes with hyphens for the sake of that online program. Before using any italics, quotation marks, or capitalization, please simply review these relevant links. Incorrect verb tense is also a very common problem and often makes your logic fall apart. Improve this immediately and thank me later. This is often taught incorrectly, but please do not refer to yourself as the researcher in the third person or use the editorial we. Lastly, and please know there are many other common mistakes, please see the links regarding proper reference section formatting. I realize faculty rarely look at a student's reference section formatting, but please do not be sloppy. In conclusion, I realize students are often told to trust the process for their dissertation, and often without any details provided about the process. I hope this presentation helps. Academic research and writing are not easy. Things are difficult when you do them for the first time. To reach completion, I want you to review the literature more holistically. Develop informed ideas to help chunk and outline your writing. Regularly ask yourself, could I do that? And then do it while being guided by the path of the literature. This will require checking yourself and seeking feedback. To help you with blind spots and bias, form peer writing groups. Set yourself up for success. Show the reader the important stuff instead of telling them what to think. Set up realistic expectations and deliver. Prove yourself as an informed guide. And that's everything. Please peruse the links in the description section, like the video, share it with others, and email if you have questions about anything. Write on and fight on.